Hey everyone from the waiting room. Thanks for coming in. Welcome to week 9 of the Sustainability Business and Entrepreneurship Lecture Series. This is our final lecture of this series. So we have Rachel Friedman with us today, who I'll introduce in a moment. Um, First, I just wanted to share a few slides. I always struggle getting to the first one. There we go. So here's some 4 resources you might find helpful. This is the last time I'm going to be sharing these resources this quarter, but I will put them in the chat so that hopefully they live on. We've got the UCLA Critical Media Literacy Research Guide, Explaining the News to Our Kids. That's a 10-minute read. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and Crisis Text Line. So, like I said, this is the 8th and final lecture in the series. We'll pick back up in January, so stay tuned and look out in your email for that calendar of lectures. We've got a great agenda coming up. Um, First, I'll introduce me. So I'm Paige. I'm the assistant director of the Celtic, which is the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership and Transformational Change. We're a public service center here on the Olympia campus. We host this lecture series. We have some curricular and co-curricular course offerings, and we coordinate internships in business management and entrepreneurship. So if you're looking for an internship or you're just looking for overall coursework in those areas, email us at celtic@evergreen.edu. Our co-sponsor is Thurston Green Business, which is a business designation that you can get here in Thurston County. It's totally free and easy to apply. Applications are open and they'll close on January 1st for this next year. So if you're interested in applying for that, go to their website, which I can link in the chat, and apply online. Our fiscal sponsor is the Clean Energy Committee, also known as the CEC. It's a student-led committee with the mission to support clean energy projects and share sustainability strategies at the Evergreen State College. So this lecture series is funded in full by the CEC. So we have Rachel Friedman with us today from the Community Farmland Trust. For 30 years, Rachel has been an environmental regulator working in local, state, and federal government. She has a passion for protection of the environment, which is backed up by an undergraduate degree in botany and a master's of science degree in forestry. Working in the field of environmental protection has its highs and lows. After 30 years in her field, she felt worn out and recreated her career by opening a small business in fitness and dance. But her concern for the health of the environment, the local economy, and our community led her to get involved with numerous nonprofit organizations such as Sustainable South Sound and now the Community Farmland Trust. Working with this CFLT is fulfilling a number of passions, with healthy local food being just one of them. So, with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Paige. And thank you to Paige and Tamsin for inviting me to speak to you today. I have to admit, I'm used to giving presentations to humans, so I feel like I'm talking to myself. So, hi, everybody. When Paige first contacted me, I wondered, what I could share with you that would be relevant to this course. And as I read and reread the course description, I found a number of places that my story could be useful for your really important intersectional course on sustainability, business, and entrepreneurship. So today I'm going to talk to you about issues that integrate the food system, farming, farmland, and farmland preservation into business and economic development. I'm going to provide a picture of how a local nonprofit is at the nexus of this issue. And while I'm not employed by this nonprofit, I hope to give you a taste of what a career in this field might look like. So, as Paige said, I'm Rachel Friedman. I'm currently the chair of the Community Farmland Trust. I've been on the board since January, excuse me, I've been a chair since January 2024, but I've been on the board since 2021. Um, you heard a little bit about my kind of past. I was in government for 30 years at both the local, state, and federal level. My last position was with the National Marine Fisheries Service as a fish biologist working on endangered salmon projects. Um, so my career, which was involved with fisheries and toxic sediments and issues on environmental regulation, and then a business portion of my career being in fitness and dance, you might say, what do you have anything to do with farming, Rachel? And you're right, because from a training perspective, I don't, but I eat. I, and I think all of you eat. And as someone who values what I eat, I'm privileged to be able to eat and feed my family healthy, locally grown food, something that not everybody else is able to do, not everyone is able to do. And because of those interests in trying to obtain locally grown food, I have been a customer of the CSA movement for 3 decades, for 30 years. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And if you're not familiar with that term, uh, CSAs are an important business model for many, many farmers. They're a model where consumers, such as myself, buy shares of a farm's harvest. And in the late winter and early spring, we basically pay them for that share. And that's in advance of their planting and their growing season. And as a result of that, then, for some segment of the growing season, recipients get a weekly box of food that comes from the farm. Uh, the CSA program allows farmers to have income to purchase seed, soil amendments, or even hire help at the beginning of the year, something that, in the late winter, early spring, where they haven't had money coming in over the winter, they need those funds to begin to farm again. And so, in that way, CSAs are a manner in which the community, like myself, like anyone who eats, can support local farmers, strengthen their local economies, connect consumers with the people and the places that produce their food. And so, because of my 30 years of buying farm shares and getting to know farmers and receiving local produce and products from those farmers, I've learned about the amazing diversity of farming and food types that occur in our region. We're an amazingly rich region for farming. We're very fortunate. But I've also learned how difficult it is to be a farmer and all of the rigors that are involved in farming. Farmers are business people. They have to plan, they have to make decisions, they have to take risks, just like any other business person. But they're also at the mercy of the environment. So, weather, poor germination of seeds, pests, a whole host of kind of what you might think of not business modalities can affect a farmer. And many of those are out of their control. I don't know if your previous speaker spoke to you about that, kind of those issues or not, vis-a-vis farming and the kind of the business of farming. Possibly you'll hear about it next term when Tierney Creech speaks to you about her farm, the Common Ground Farm. So one of the stories that I remember of being a CSA recipient, I am no longer, I have a huge garden and I grow my own food, so I don't partake in the CSA program. But, here's an example of one of the issues that a farmer faces completely out of their control. I had purchased a fall and winter CSA from a local farm, and They had grown an incredible amount of winter squash that they were going to, provide to their customers over the course of that CSA season. But their barn leaked and all of their squash rotted. And so they had to pivot quickly so that they could provide to their CSA members, adequate food. And I just remember that fall and winter eating more potatoes than I could ever imagine eating in my life, which was, an issue that was out of that farmer's control. So my close involvement as a financial supporter via CSAs and recipient of farm produce is how I find myself to be involved with the Community Farmland Trust and chair of that nonprofit organization in my retirement. All right. So let's talk about the Community Farmland Trust for a moment. We've been around since 1997, and our mission is to promote vibrant local food and farming systems through community-supported farmland preservation, educational outreach, and partnerships that increase opportunities for farms and farmers to flourish. That's a big mouthful. We are a member-based organization who strives to have farmers, community members, and stakeholders on our board of directors. Before I go further into what we do and how we do it, I want to kind of set a stage for you about the state of farming in our state of Washington. I'm going to talk to you using some data that were taken from the 2022 agricultural census. And this information is a representation of the impacts and the current and potential future impacts on the food system and those associated economies. So according to the census, 2022 census, since 2017, we've seen a 5.6% reduction of farmland in Washington state, with over 800,000 acres of farmland no longer in production. This equates to a loss of over 3,700 farms throughout the state of Washington. The hardest hit are the smaller farms of less than 10 acres, and those farms are most likely to be close to urban areas and vulnerable to being permanently lost to urban sprawl, where the development pressures are enormous. And some of the greatest development pressures come from high-tech servers, distribution centers, and housing, of which we have a great need, admittedly. The American Farmland Trust, a national nonprofit organization, has done a lot of research on the loss of farmland. They estimate by 2040, we stand to lose another 192,000 acres in Washington state alone if we don't shift the pattern of turning farmland into development. The census data for the age of farmers is also pretty alarming. Washington state saw a 5.1% decline in producers under the age of 35, while producers over the age of 35 have grown by 13.2%. So what does that mean? That means that our farmers are getting older, they're getting ready to retire, and there's not a lot of young farmers coming up behind them to fill in the gaps. Also, access to land and agricultural services has historically been a disproportionate barrier for farmers of color. For producers across the state of Washington, we've seen some good trends actually between the 2017 and the 2017 census and 2022 census. Black farmers grew from a total of 90 to 118 in that time frame. And that was contrary actually to a nationwide decline of 8%. So go Washington. We're getting some good, farmers of color on our land. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done. So this is where the Community Farmland Trust comes in. When the trust was started in 1997, it was designed using, and you're going to kind of hear me use similar terms, but keep your ears open. We are the Community Farmland Trust, and I'm going to talk about community land trust models, okay? So when we were designed using a community land trust model. And what that does is it works to assure affordable land and farming infrastructure in perpetuity. And I want to re-emphasize affordability of land and farming infrastructure in perpetuity. So keeping costs available to young farmers and then assuring that farmers can be on the land as long as they need to. The community land trust model is different from other land trust models like the Capital Land Trust or the Nisqually Land Trust, which you may have heard about. Those trusts work to conserve ecologically important land in perpetuity, while the Community Farmland Trust is designed to provide, as I said, affordable land and farming infrastructure to farmers in perpetuity. And we are also interested in preserving ecological important parts of our properties. So this is pretty important for farmers. Normally, beginning farmers are renters on lands that are owned by others. And as such, they're at the mercy of their landlords who can decide to sell their land out from under those farmers without much notice. It's a very common occurrence. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the older farmers who are hoping that when they retire, they can use their land as an asset to build their nest egg for retirement, right? That's what, we all hope as we move into retirement. The older farmers are often at the mercy of not finding another farmer with the means to purchase their land. And hence, many older farmers are selling out to development. In both cases, we're losing valuable farmland. While these are oversimplifications, these scenarios are what we commonly see. So how does the Community Farmland Trust preserve farmland? And so what I'm going to do now, and you're going to have to bear with me because I've never done this. Well, I have done this. I'm going to share a slideshow with you. So let's see if I can do it. I'm going to start at the start. Could people give me thumbs up if you can see it? I'm not going to expand it to the full screen because it didn't seem like it works. Thank you. Thank you. So this is my presentation to the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership and Transformational Change, and it has to do with land affordability and farming in perpetuity. So our vision, Community Farmland Trust's vision, is to have abundant, productive, sustainable local farmland, which provides healthy food for our community and contributes to a viable farm economy. And we do that by a number of things. We permanently protect farmland and provide affordable land security for farmers. We assure that farmland remains farming through easements and lease documents. We build a community that appreciates and supports locally produced food where farms can provide a good economic return for those who work the land. The Community Farmland Trust works in two ways to preserve farmland. We purchase farmland with the help of federal, state, local grants, as well as private funds, and we commit to keep that land in farming forever. This is done through the purchase of development rights, meaning that the land can never be developed. So we purchase these development rights, and while there may be a house on 20 acres, the purchase of those rights say that you cannot build another house on those acres. That land has to stay in farming. Once we purchase a piece of property, we then work with a new farmer and we lease that preserved land under the terms of a 99-year renewable inheritable, meaning that if a farmer leases land from us and they want to have their offspring inherit that farm and they have their offspring farm on that land, they can do that. If the farmers who are leasing from us have the means and the interest, they can purchase the farmhouse. So let's say we have a 20-acre farm with a farmhouse and a barn. If the farmer wants to purchase the house solely, we work with them to do that. And because they're not buying the land underneath the house, the rates for purchase of that property are, in many cases, in much greater reach for those young farmers than if they had to try to find the funding to buy the whole 20 acres. So if the farmer buys the house, for example, what that does is it gives them an ownership stake in the farm and the ability to build equity in those buildings that they own, and then land security through the fact that they have a lease with us for 99 years. So I want to give you some examples of some of the farms that we have right now and let you see how we've done this. So let's see, I think you can see all that. Let's see, yeah. This is what our oldest farm. It's the Scatter Creek Farm and Conservancy, and it's currently farmed by Kearsup Farms. It's a 140 acre farm. We acquired it in 2013. Colin Barraclough and Janine Bradwin are the owners and operators of Kearsup Farms, and they lease 60 acres of our land on which they produce vegetables, grains, and poultry, which they sell at farmers markets, excuse me, and to CSA customers in Olympia and Seattle. They own the house, they own the historic house and the barn and several other of their many buildings on that property. They own several of those buildings. They also lease some of the buildings from us. So by doing that, they work 60 acres of that property, make that income. They pay us rent for the few buildings that they rent from us, but they then have those, they own the house and the barn and some other buildings, which then if they decide they want to move, they can sell and have some income then from which to move on. On this farm, on Scatter Creek, we also support other farm enterprises. At this time, another small farm, Wobbly Cart, also owns one of the buildings. And that is, they use that for their dry storage for their winter crops, which they also sell via CSAs in Olympia, Centralia, and Portland. Just so you might be saying, well, how does the Farmland Trust obtain these farms? Where do you get the money? So in Thurston County, there's a tax that we all pay, some small percentage as landowners, as homeowners, and that goes into what's called the Conservation Futures Program. So every year they open up a pot of about $500,000, and nonprofit organizations can compete for those dollars. So we were able to obtain some conservation futures money for this property. We also got some money from the state, Washington State Salmon Recovery Funding Board. Also, on this property is some land that is actually in a Conservancy Trust, and it's the Creekside Conservancy, because Scatter Creek, which is the salmon bearing stream, runs through this property as well. So there were a variety of mixed sources of funding that actually also we got money from the Puyallup tribe, the Nisqually tribe, the Squaxin, Kearsarge Farm put money. So this was a very collaborative funding scheme to get Scatter Creek. The next farm to talk about is Garden Raised Urban Bounty, or GRUB. In 2015, the Community Farmland Trust acquired a 1.1 acre parcel right in Olympia. And the reason for that was Grub had been farming on that parcel. It was owned by someone else. And as I described to you before, that landowner was getting ready to sell. Grub had been very successfully farming on that property, didn't want to lose that parcel, came to us about acquiring the land. And so the Community Farmland Trust purchased that 1.18 acre plot, and now are leasing it to Grub to continue their operations. Normally, we wouldn't be purchasing something quite so small, but this was an important kind of collaborative venture, which was great because we absolutely support Grub. If you're not familiar with who they are, they work with people of all ages in what they call a relationship-based programming around growing and preparing food. And they work at the intersection of food, education, and health systems to grow healthy food, people, and communities. And their primary focus is serving marginalized communities. The primary funders for the Grub property were the Conservation Futures dollars, the County Conservation Futures dollars, and Grub. Grub also helped to help us purchase this property. Another property is the James Family Farm. We purchased that in 2021, and it is currently leased to Common Ground Farm, which is a woman-owned business. We leased to them in 2023. They currently only farm 3 of the 29 acres. What you see in this picture is the pasture. That is basically hayed once or twice a year. And it's kind of the lowland area, and Common Ground farms on the upland 3 acres. There's also a wonderful oak woodland, which is a conservation area because of its oak trees. Common Ground basically does intensive drip irrigation farming, and they are very, very conscious of keeping the soil quality high and improving the soil function. Common Ground is one of the region's earliest CSA farms, and they've been providing subscribers of weekly boxes of food for a long, long time. And as I said previously, Tierney Creech, who is the farmer of Common Ground, will be speaking during the winter term. And so you can ask her specific questions about her business and how she goes about that. Funding for the acquisition of Common Ground was again through Thurston County Conservation Futures, the Tides Foundation. And then we were able to ask our membership and supporters to help us kind of complete the purchase through some donations. The last farm to talk about is the Oyster Bay Farm. And in 2015, this 39-acre farm was transitioned through the Community Farmland Trust's first agricultural easement. So what does that mean? It's owned, this farm, property and buildings, is owned and operated by the Oyster Bay Farm, which until recently had been raising chickens and eggs and seasonal livestock. Um, I heard that they are curtailing their egg business, and so we don't know what their future plans are. Um, the fact that they owned this, we helped them basically remove the development rights, which means that, as I described before, there can be no development. The tax base is lower. The buildings that exist on the land are the only buildings that can kind of be on the land. They can replace on a foundation, but they cannot put new permanent structures on that land. And through the easement process with Oyster Bay Farm, they are required to keep that in commercial agriculture in perpetuity. By having the lack of development rights, their tax base is lower, and so they can make a go in in farming, which is a very very difficult and often not lucrative way to kind of raise money. Let's see. We use Thurston County Conservation Futures also to put the easement on this. And even though we did not buy it, it does cost to remove development rights. Okie dokie. So as I was talking about the agricultural easements, basically we help landowners acquire compensation to remove those rights. And in doing so, we work with them to ensure that lands stay in farming in perpetuity. So I'm just about to end, which maybe was faster than I thought I was going to go, but yay. What I'd like to do is talk about how the Community Farmland Trust gets the community involved. So every year since our inception, we have worked to connect local farmers with the local community. In the beginning, in the early, early days, our efforts were a trifold map. I wish I could show you a picture of it, which listed a few farms that we would share with the community so that people who were looking to buy blueberries or corn or chickens, they could use that little trifold to find a few local farmers. Currently, we have an 80-page guide. In fact, I'm going to wheel back and this. Many of you have seen it. Our Fresh from the Farm guide. I put the link to the guide. So we basically print. This year we printed 14,000 copies. We have over 100 farms in this guide. We list farmers markets, food banks, farm stands within 4 counties. We also have, so on this page, we've got our link. We've got the guide as a flip book online. We produce this guide through farmer memberships, sponsorships, and advertisement, and we give it away for free. And in fact, this year, the farmers don't even have to pay. They would have to pay like a nominal $100 to get themselves listed in this guide. This year, we have basically a grant from none other than Puget Sound Energy. Who would have thought? That is helping over 100 farmers get into our guide. Our sponsors are a a really diverse group of farms and organizations, all of whom value the retention of local food, which is good for the community as well as people's health. And this farm guide is a key way for the Community Farmland Trust to work to build that education and community outreach and help those community members learn about what's available in their area and support them, support the farmers. So my role as chair of the board of the Community Farmland Trust spans kind of a variety of activities. We do not have an executive director. Most land trusts have a board and then have a staff element. We have staff, but we don't have an executive director. I play that role with one other board member. I co-manage 3 part-time staff. I oversee budget development and implementation with our board, and I'm directly involved with the board in the acquisition and preservation of farmland and working with our farmer lessees to ensure that they manage the land in the most sustainable way possible. So while, as I said, this is a non-paying, my job is a non-paying position. If you're interested in working for land trusts, many land trusts have a variety of kind of specific positions: administrative, stewardship, development. But then there's also the executive director, who in effect acts as the supervisor of the staff, who is also then responsible to the board. And I think with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you for having me. I'm going to stop my share. And I'm wide open for questions. No, not directly. There is an overarching organization called Washington Association of Land Trusts. They're the umbrella. They're kind of like the parent. And many land trusts in the state of Washington pay dues to the Washington Association of Land Trusts, and they help us with policy guidance. They help us with issues around staffing, salary, benefits, insurance. So my only association with the North Olympic is that I see them at meetings. Now, I have had situations where I've had a question because I've heard somebody say something about something in these Washington Association of Land Trust meetings. And so I will often pick up the phone and call somebody. And I have had the opportunity to speak with someone at the North Olympic in the recent past, I'd say about a year ago. But we're not associated directly, no. Oh, brother, that's hitting a nail. That's a very big topic. That's a topic that we are continually talking about. So the USDA has a set of kind of actuarial numbers that they have devised nationwide for lease rates. So there's that very kind of 60,000 foot level. And they break things down into, is it irrigated land? Is it unirrigated land? What are the soils? What is it used for? Is it grazed? Is it produce? So there's that kind of high level. We work between that and doing kind of what realtors do, where they kind of do comparables. If you're looking to purchase a house and you're looking at what's around, we talk to farmers, and we talk to farmers about their insurance and their taxes. We talk to those who are renting. What are they paying per acre? So there's a lot to unpack for that question. We have a current policy that differentiates large farms 20 acres or more versus 20 acres or less in terms of how we set lease rates. There, there's no standard. How's that for a complicated response? Good question. So there are many land trusts in the state of Washington or land trusts around the country. I guess I would say start by identifying where's your region, what region are you wanting to work in, and then Google searching Thurston County land trusts to start narrowing it down, and then start researching what those land trusts look like and do those align with your interests, and then start making some phone calls. Sometimes you can, for example, in our county, I know that the Thurston Conservation District will post job offerings for land trust openings in Thurston County. So I don't know if there's there's no one size fits all, but I think if you start to winnow down where and who and start literally making phone calls and looking into websites, that's my guess of how to get there. That's a very interesting question. And I think the first part of it, which assumes that land depreciates, is probably that's probably where you might get tripped up, because actually land, well, housing prices have been steadily appreciating. And so if a farmer buys the house for $5 and in 20 years the value is $20, the farmer can make that, they make that difference. So it is true that farming is a hard economic life. It is very true, because in addition to the whims of the environment, you're also you are at the mercy of the cost of whatever it is you're selling. I don't know if I would agree with the concept of the sharecropping, and in part because the farmers own, if they, so for example, on common ground, there is no, there's no structure. So Tierney doesn't own anything on that land. She just farms it and pays us a lease rate. It's like she's paying us rent to work our land. She gets all of the income that she generates. So it's a good question. I think that I think I've kind of answered the majority of it. What is something that gives me the biggest hope? Well, that's a good question, because it's hard to have hope. Um, every time we are either contacted by a farmer or we contact a farmer and we start in on a process of working with them to acquire that land or remove development rights, there are so many possible off ramps that could kind of end the process. For example, we were working with a gentleman. He had a beautiful farm with water rights, and he really wanted to work with us. And his kids came in and said, "Nope, nope, we want more money for that. We want to sell it to somebody who's going to put a housing development on it. So I guess my hope is that as I see more young people wanting to get into farming, I my hope is that we can be a, a kind of a vector to help some of those young farmers find a place. Young farmers, farmers of color, anybody who's been displaced, hope that we can, help them find a place. So I believe that Enterprise for Equity in our area still has, and I haven't been following them, so I'm not completely sure, but they used to have a program for agricultural, people who wanted to kind of move into agriculture. So Enterprise for Equity is a nonprofit where basically anybody can learn how to start a business. And if one graduates, at least again, this my data is maybe a year or two old, but it used to be that when if you graduated from Enterprise for Equity, you could get a microloan from them to start uh, either to rent or to buy some seeds or whatever, what have you. Um, I don't know, and I think I see people in the audience who would know better than I. I don't know if the Evergreen uh, organic garden gives guidance on kind of how to become a farming startup. I
So
don't know.
I can answer that just briefly, Rachel. We do have